Pursuit of Growth show, where we hold candid conversations with fascinating individuals from all walks of life to learn their passions, successes, failures, lessons learned, and how they apply personal growth to their lives. We'll end the conversation with key takeaways that we can all implement to better ourselves and the lives of those around us. As always, I'm joined by my co-host and partner in crime, Sammy Gonzalez. Sammy, what's happening, man?
What's up, Greg? I'm so excited tonight to be joined by our special guest, Wendi McGowan-Ellis. Wendi and I have known each other for quite some time now. We've had some business deals together. We've had some great coffees and some great times set up talking shop about some of the different businesses she's been part of. And so you may be asking yourself, well, who is Wendi? Because I want to get to know her. Well, you're in luck because that's exactly what we're going to do tonight. So I'll read her little bit of bio that she sent over to us, and then we'll dig into the show. So thank you so much, Wendi, for joining us.
Absolutely. Excited to be here. Thank you, guys.
Awesome. So Wendi has over 20 years of intra and entrepreneurial experience, and she is the executive producer and co-host for hire at Wendistry, LLC. Wendi helps her clients say something significant, something which motivates listeners to subscribe and go on the journey, because it's not about who arrives, it's about who stays when you start streaming your story. We love that tagline, and we actually have a whole mess of questions about like how you came up with that too, because it's very strong.
Yes, thank you.
So with that, our very first question, as people may have heard, you are an entrepreneur.
Yes.
And we all know that as an entrepreneur, you are really in control of your schedule.
Yep.
And something that we aim to do is help people with tactical and actionable items. And a lot of people that listen to this show are always looking for insight and advice from high performing individuals like yourself.
Yep.
So as that entrepreneur for many years, what are some of the best ways you've learned to stay motivated and organized?
So I have two answers to that. Number one, well, first of all, I want to thank you both again, Greg and Sammy, for letting me be on the show. I'm super excited to share this time with you and with your audience. So being in control, there's two things that I do to be in control and then also be in control and be organized and also stay motivated. So I'm going to start with number one. Staying motivated is, for me, readers are leaders. I'm going to say that again. Readers are leaders. So I am an avid reader. I've always been an avid reader. I will tell you that I continuously thank my parents for instilling in me a love of reading. There is an adorable snapshot that my mother has of me, and I'm literally like 3 months old, maybe, sitting on my father's lap, and he's flipping through reading a National Geographic, and he's reading it out loud to me. My mother was a reading teacher, elementary school. She helped kids with special reading challenges, so dyslexia and other issues. So reading is a huge part of my life. I wake up in the morning and I read a business book or something, a self-development and growth book in the morning. And then when I go to bed at night, I close out with fiction. And I am also, side note about me, I am an avid Agatha Christie fan. So I am in the process of reading every Agatha Christie novel that she wrote in the order that she published them. So that's my little project. She's published over 65, 70 books in her lifetime. And so this is kind of my little side hobby hustle. I'm obsessed with murder, but I like cozy murders. Those of you who know what that means, it's like an English thing, the body in the library with the club or the knife or whatever, the candlestick, whatever. That's totally me. So that's how I stay motivated, is reading. My two top books that I recommend for motivation for entrepreneurs are, I'm looking at my bookshelf. Number one, Simon Sinek's Start With Why. That is like a go-to for anybody who's thinking about starting a business. You can just start there. And then my second most favorite book is by Brendan Burchard, High Performance Habits. That's a big one for me. I'm about to start rereading that again. So that's how I stay motivated. Now, when it comes to staying organized and controlling my schedule, I'm going to show you my handy dandy right here. I am obsessed with Michael Hyatt's company, Full Focus Planner. So I have the Full Focus Planner here. Even though I am a digital person, I am obsessed with this planner and writing things down and keeping things. It literally stays right here on my desk. It's right here in front of me all day. And I love how his planner is organized into annual goals, then you break it down into quarterly, and then it breaks down into monthly, and then all the way down into daily and to-do lists and tasks and all of that. So I've got my calendar app on my phone, but then I'm also literally rewriting it every morning when I get up. That's one of my first things to do after I finish reading my business book is I go to my planner and I start looking at what are my daily top 3 things. That's something that's big in this planner as well. And so those things help me not only stay organized, but it keeps my goals in front of me on a quarterly basis so that I can see from week to week the actions that I took, the meetings that I had that were productive and moved me towards my goals. And then also, what were the activities and things that I did that were a waste of time and I need to remove them from my life?
That's actually a really powerful exercise. A lot of people don't realize that if you're not tracking the activities and kind of ranking them too, you can find yourself down a rabbit hole of very unproductive activities that become routines.
Exactly. But I also organize this planner at the beginning of every quarter, not only with professional goals, but personal goals. Like one of my personal goals is to stay connected to important people in my life. I've got my parents, so I'm an only child. My husband Scott is an only child. So I've got my parents, my in-laws, my cousin, because I only have one cousin and she has one daughter. So family is first. And then my best friend, my networks, my friends, my network, my business networks, my connections, people like you, Sammy, and you, Greg. I mean, I've got everybody kind of written out and how I'm connected to them. And then it's a goal for me to reach out and talk to 3 people from that list every single week. I'm either going to meet them for coffee, I'm going to have lunch with them, I'm going to have a phone call, not an email, not a text chat. It's a true connection. So I'm a Gen Xer. I'm still a phone call person. That's my primary way to connect with people, and then set a coffee or a lunch date or a happy hour or whatever.
Sammy, how refreshing is it to hear everything that she just said?
I mean, I think I already need a new notepad because I've already filled it up with actionable tips too. Yeah.
Well, Wendi, as someone who's I'm loving everything that you're saying. So I'm a person that also believes in the power of reading. When you described the full focus planner, so I have my own version of that I've created, but it sounds like I would love to be able to actually look to see what you're actually using, because it looks like it actually kind of puts it together and maybe a little bit nicer format than, say, the several yellow legal pads that I use and then my laptop computer. But I wanted to share a quick story with you. My senior year in college, actually when I graduated from college, at my graduation party at a local bar, I climbed on top of a table. I got the entire bar's attention and I took a toast and I said, here is to never reading another book for the rest of our lives. And the entire bar went nuts and we took our drink and no more reading. And then I realized within maybe a year that I was just actively getting, for lack of a better description, dumber.
Yes.
From just the way that I spoke, from the way that I thought. And I actually had someone tell me, you really need to start looking into like business books and self-development books. Yes. And I can tell you that was one of the last things that had any type of an interest in my world.
Yes.
And when you mentioned Simon Sinek and then books like from Dale Carnegie, and I mean, there's so many that we could talk about.
Yeah.
It just became a passion of mine. And that reading is ultimately what led me to get so passionate about the work that Sammy and I are now doing, which
Yes.
is involved into the pursuit of growth. So
Yes.
I can't talk enough about the power of reading. But then my question to you in terms of the relationship goals, which you just mentioned.
Yes.
So I love, and I do a similar task, and Sammy does too, where we take kind of the people in our lives, and we rank them in our inner circle, our outer circle, and kind of our third circle. And
Yes.
so you mentioned that you like to reach out and have phone calls. Talk a little bit more about some of the things that you do in terms of, we all have vast networks of people, and we can go a long period of time without seeing people. What are some of the things, if you can expand on how you kind of keep those inner circle people, the outer circles, and your different connections, kind of watered? Because like a plant, you've got to water relationships for them to grow. I'd love to hear you expand a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I'm going to start with, I'll start with my parents, my family. I actively see my parents, if not every week, having lunch with them. It's at least every 2 weeks, it's every other week. My parents are getting up there in age. Hell, I'm getting up there in age. So, it's important. And I'm an only child again. So it's important to do that. So I have lunch with my parents. My best friend Katie, who I'll probably send this link to, so she'll be famous. And my best friend Katie and I literally talk on the phone every morning from 7:40 to 8 a.m. She has to be in her chair at her work at 8 a.m. So I talk to her. We talk every morning on her drive on the way into her office. 20 minutes, Monday through Friday, almost every single day we talk. And we have stupid conversations. They're very repetitive. Obviously, in COVID, we've been having the same conversation for the last 18 months. We will just stop. I want that moron wear a mask. It's the same conversation, but it doesn't matter. She's my best friend, and we stay connected that way. I'm going to come back to the planner as far as, then the next layer out, my networks, I'm on the board of the National Association of Women Business Owners, NABO. I just joined their board. So that is a fresh circle of new women that I'm looking to grow and build relationship with. But I'm going to go back to my planner. I mean, I have to schedule the time. What's the phrase, what gets scheduled gets managed, or
oh gosh.
Yeah,
It's something that seems like what gets written down gets done, or something
yeah,
along that,
exactly.
something along those roads. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. If it's written down, it gets done, and you can manage it, and you've made time for it. And that's the thing with me. I'm an advocate for, even if it's a 15-minute window, like literally blocking that out and saying, okay, I'm going to text this person now, or making it a task of where sometime if I've got dead time, I'm waiting for somebody to join a call, I can fire off a quick email to somebody. So I'm a huge scheduler. I'm big on scheduling. So I hope that answered your question, because now
it did, and it really encouraged me. We actually, Sammy and I talk about, and in fact, there's a whole chapter in our book about focus on relationships.
Yes.
And you can look at so many studies that will tell you, when you look at joy in people's lives, the biggest variable is the quality of the relationships.
Yeah.
And for relationships to flourish, you've got to take time, you've got to put effort into them. And I think in this world that we live in, we all can get so consumed and going in so many different directions that we forget to sit back and say, no, we need to actually plan and put purpose behind growing relationships for the people that are in our lives, our inner circle, our outer circles, and then those different connections that we have. And I'm a believer that the reason why we struggle with it goes exactly to the point you just made. We don't plan for it. And so I'm really, really excited to hear you talk about how you use your planner. And so I hope people realize, if you really want to get good at relationships, utilize it like your work and write it down, make plans for it.
Exactly. That's exactly what I do. I mean, and there really is no excuse to not do it, because everyone knows, if you really were honest with yourself, how many hours a day do you spend on this thing, like looking at Instagram and looking at Facebook and just, whatever, you're just flipping and wasting time, that 5 minutes of you wasting time, you could have at least texted a friend or a business colleague and said, hey, want to meet up for a drink after work next week, and then you don't have to spend 3 hours. It can be, hey, let's meet from 6 to 7 or 5 to 6, run by on your way home to have dinner with your family. But an hour with someone is an hour is way more valuable than no time at all, because we all look up. I mean, it's August. I cannot believe it's August. We're going to look up and it's going to be next August. And so, you have to make the time and planning ahead.
We had a guest on a previous episode named Dan Miller, and he is just a genius in the world of nutrition, fitness, health, and wellness. And he talked about, and Sammy, correct me if I get this incorrect, but I believe I've got it accurate. He talked about hundreds of years ago, our civilization, people typically had roughly around 100 close relationships in like the tribe around them. And that's why you saw people flourishing in different areas of life, where today we struggle with stress and anxiety and depression and fear, because in today's time, the average adult has 8 close relationships.
Yeah.
And he sees a direct correlation in a lot of the issues we're having with mental health in terms of, now there's many variables, but that's a big one, is just seeing the decrease in the value of our relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. And isn't that ironic when, most of us have 2,000 friends on Facebook, or, 3,000 connections on LinkedIn, but yet you don't really know these people.
Yeah, absolutely. And so Wendy, I wanted to touch on that too, because this is not something that you hear very common from a lot of people. So that's why Greg's like, yeah, it's refreshing, right? That it's very much the way that we think, and it's very much the way that we've grown and continue to develop these personal relationships in our growth as well. But where did that start with you? Tell us a little bit about kind of your upbringing and your background, and because this sounds like it was deep rooted, like from when you were a child.
No, not really. I mean,
so I was just way off. That's what it was.
Well, maybe as I tell my story, y'all will find the basis for this, because I've never really sat back and thought about that. Yes, only child. Y'all already heard that. But I was a shy child. I'm not naturally outgoing. It's only been in my adult years and in business and even now, every time I attend some kind of new environment, new event, I have to self-talk myself in order to not be Scarlett O'Hara. My grandmother used to call it Scarlett O'Hara. Don't act like Scarlett O'Hara and wait to be introduced. Like, you're not the belle of the ball in every situation. You need to act like the host. So that's how my grandmother kind of would try to help me get out of my shyness. But so I grew up here in Dallas, in a suburb, Garland. I grew up in Garland, and I went to I graduated 20th in my class out of 500. So I was great in high school. I went down to UT Austin, and I barely graduated college. I'm just going to admit that straight out. I really, it was a party experience for me for 4 years, but thank goodness I graduated. I have a degree in economics. I do remember my economics classes. I was very much interested in what I was learning. So I graduated with an economics degree, but I started my first business during my senior year of college, because I graduated in 1991. And I don't know if you guys remember 1991, but it was storm. And even people who were graduating with like a 3.85, 3.9 GPA were barely getting jobs. And this is also back when, if you got a job out of college at $30,000 a year, you were a millionaire. Like, you were banking. That was huge money in 1991. So Wendy did not have a 3.85 GPA. And so I started a business. I started a marketing consulting company catering to small businesses around the Austin area. And I looked up 9 years later, And that company had grown to about 75 people, and we had offices in several different cities. And this was right when the internet was becoming a thing. So I transitioned that company. I shut that company down and transitioned it to an internet marketing company, because everyone else, me and Jeff Bezos were like, this internet thing is something. Everybody else was like, well, we don't know what to do with this. And this is back in the days where people, if they had a website, they had a website counter. Do y'all remember that? Like the click counter on the homepage. That was a huge source of pride. And everyone's logo spun and was on fire. Like the fire came out of the top of the logo and the logo would spin. That was fabulous. Anyway.
Oh, those are the best websites ever, especially with the little guy under construction where he's like scooping stuff. Yep.
Yes, that was awesome. So anyway, I transitioned that to an internet, marketing company and that was mainly like helping people build websites and start it wasn't called this back then, but it was essentially content strategy. I mean, today that's what we call it, but back then it was just like, get verbiage on your website. So I eventually shut down that company because I somehow, during all of this, and at this time I'm 28, 29 years old almost, I felt like I wasn't a grown-up. I felt like I needed to get a job and have a title and drive to an office in order to be a grown-up. Like somehow being an entrepreneur at that age just felt like I was playing house and not doing it very well. So I went from then. I'm not even going to bore you with all the details. The rest of my career has been go into corporate America, take a good job, stay there for about a year to 2 years, be completely miserable, and leave and start my own consulting company again. Get sick of that, say, oh, the real money's with that job, get found by a headhunter, get pulled back into another corporate job at a higher title and higher money, and do that for a year or two, and then get sick of it and leave. And so finally doing that back and forth, my last job was in the spring of 2015. I was a vice president of digital strategy at an agency here in town. And I was completely miserable. And by that time, Scott and I had been married 3 years, and a little over 3 years. And I said, I can't do this anymore. I really cannot do this anymore. And I took about 6 months off and literally did nothing and sat on the couch and watched Netflix and went to yoga and got nails done. And that was about the extent of my activity. And that's when, but during that time in 2013, he and I had started Lifestyle Frisco in the spring of 2013. So for those of you watching, lifestylefrisco.com is a website for what to do, where to go, and who to know in Frisco, Texas. We are lifestyle content. That's what the company was. So in 2015, after me sitting on the couch for 6, he finally said, hey, we do have this other company that you might want to get involved with. Because I had been involved with starting it, and then I went into corporate America, and I'm like, I'm out. I'm not touching this. You're going to have to manage this thing, whatever. So I pulled myself off the couch and became editor-in-chief of the company and of Lifestyle Frisco. And during that time is when we really started attracting writers and people to contribute to the site. So I was doing all of the editing and managing the workflow and all of that. So fast forward a couple of years later, or 4 years into it. So in the spring of 2017, Mayor Jeff Cheney was elected for the first time as mayor. And he and his wife, Dana, had their own local site called friscoonline.com, which was mainly a forums site. So their site was very different from ours. It was a forums bulletin board kind of site. Okay. But he and Dana approached Scott and me and said, hey, you guys are now, because by that time, by the spring of 2017, like we had a well-oiled machine. We were not only producing written content, we were also producing a podcast or two and doing video content as well. And so he said, what would it take for us to kind of merge these two brands? Because Dana and I, the forums are not where it's at anymore, but this URL, friscoonline.com, has a ton of Google authority around Frisco, Texas. So we merged the companies. Jeff and Dana became minority equity partners in the business. And so at that point, I became CEO of the company and took over sales and started aggressively going after business clients and growing the business. And so we were on track right up until COVID to do around $250,000, 300,000 with the business, which was, going to be a nice business for that pace of growth for sales. And then COVID hit, and a lot of things have shifted and changed. And, I don't want to say that COVID killed our business, because it didn't. It's forced us to relook at it and relook at how we're doing business. And it also, last year during 2020, it forced me to look at, am I really happy doing this? Because my role as CEO has always, for Lifestyle Frisco, had always been sales, driving revenue, driving profitability, all of those kinds of things. And then also being the face of the company. And after doing sales for a good solid 4 years, 4 years, it was now getting into a management mode. Like I was seeing this pace of hitting that 250,000 and then hitting 400,000 and then hitting 500,000. And then, I was seeing a clear path of how that was going to happen. And that was great as far as the numbers and money in our pocket, but I wasn't really excited about it because, again, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm not a salesperson. I mean, I can do it and I enjoy it, but I enjoy what's the next idea? What's the next thing that I'm going to start and do? But during all of that time, I gained experience doing not only video and co-hosting people on videos, but also doing podcasts. And so when I made the decision, or Scott and I made the decision to sell Lifestyle Frisco, which we're in the process of doing, around 6 months ago, we started the process. I started thinking about, okay, what does Wendi want to do? And that has morphed into Wendistry, which I'm now, actively a part of that. And Scott is managing the sale of Lifestyle Frisco.
Whenever you talk about that fantastic story, and it really gives a lot of insight as to kind of the, for lack of a better term right now, the hustle that you have inside of you, because you definitely showcased, I think, through that story and through your life that you are one of those people that can take something from nothing and grow it. But that's where you have really excelled across your life. And I think it goes back to like the planning and the reading and the understanding and like being in front of a lot of the different strategies and that learning aspect with it, which I think is so key, that a lot of people right now, I think, are seeing where they're saying like, I don't know what's next. Like they don't know where to go. Right. So they're like, okay, well, they may have the same thing as you. Like, let me find a job, because that job's going to give me that passion. It's going to give me that satisfaction that I need. And Greg's got a great saying, and so I won't steal it from him. But Greg, tell you about your what your job should do for you, or what you should do for your job.
Oh yeah, well, I'm a big believer in saying that so many people say they want their job to give them passion.
Yeah.
I challenge people to give passion to your work.
Yes.
Passion is excitement, it's enthusiasm. Now, we do want to seek and find work that we love, because when we find that, that's when love is coming to us and we're giving passion back.
Oh, yeah.
But oftentimes it takes trial, it takes error, it takes experience to figure out what is it that we really love. But even if you're doing a job that it's just not fulfilling you, or you realize, this isn't really where I think my skill sets match up. I believe if you're showing up to do a job, give your passion to that job,
Yeah.
You can equally have your eye over here going, okay, I'm looking for what's next, but I'm still going to give my passion here because that's what's going to allow me to continue to flourish, and that's going to fuel me into where I go next. And I love your story. And I just think back to myself. I think back to many of my close friends and family who, you're always looking to, okay, when's the next job that I can find in corporate America or over here that's going to give me that fulfillment? But your story always brings it back to you and your why.
Yes.
What is it that you are excited about, and what drives you? And it sounds like when you finally made that last change from going back from being an entrepreneur to corporate America, and then you had the 6 months on the couch, that's where it kind of clicked for you that, when you got back into lifestyle Frisco, that, hey, this is where I truly belong and where I truly believe I should be. And that was just cool for me to hear that process of you went back and forth a lot of times.
I did because I always thought that the title and the money would make me happy. And what I really discovered in the last job, what I finally admitted to myself was, like most entrepreneurs, I only get excited about things that I am driving.
Mhm.
Like I'm a great team member. Like I'm great on a nonprofit board or a for-profit board or whatever. Like I can work. I hate to sound like I can't work with others. Doesn't play well with others. I don't want to be that person. I'm not that person. But if it's something that I have a work passion behind, I've discovered that I need to be the one in charge, and that's the only way that I'm happy. I don't. I take input and criticism well from others, but they damn well better know what they're talking about if they're going to be criticizing and giving feedback. So I'll smile and nod at you if you want to give me feedback, but if you don't know what you're talking about, then I'm going to have a problem with that. And so that's just who I am and who I've become as I've matured in life.
Okay, another question I have in terms of you making the transition from a corporate role to being a full-time entrepreneur, did you ever find during that time of kind of going back and forth, did you ever have fear that of what the risk was in being an entrepreneur? Did you feel like a safety net in corporate America?
I used my time in corporate America to set aside money, yes. But I've always been a high risk taker and have a high risk tolerance.
Okay.
And I believe that the reason for that is, again, because of my parents. So my parents, my mother had a middle class to upper middle class upbringing. My parents both grew up in Texarkana. My mom on the Texas side, my dad on the Arkansas side, and they didn't meet each other until college, junior college there in Texarkana. But my mom grew up middle class to upper middle class. My dad was literally born on a couch in a three-room house that they had to go out and get well water for drinking. Now, my father had an older sister, has an older sister, my aunt, who 2 years older than he is. And she has, I want to say, 2 PhDs and was a college professor at the University of Texas System. My father has a master's. His parents and my aunt's parents, my grandfather barely got out of 8th grade, and my grandmother did graduate high school, and she had a secretarial job. So literally in 2 generations, well, 1 generation, you go from barely educated to multiple advanced degrees. And then they also flipped the switch on the finances. Like my parents they've saved their whole lives and they're very comfortable now that they've retired. And so that I grew up comfortable. I grew up never even thinking about money. Now, I don't mean that to say that I was spoiled rotten. I was not. I knew not to ask for a Maserati for my 16th birthday. I was super happy to get my mom's car, passed down to me. That's great. But my parents also didn't they didn't spare expense on me either if they really wanted me to have something. So I had a fantastic childhood. I've never felt scared. I've never felt fearful. I've never been afraid of anything. And my dad told me that I could do and be anything that I wanted to do and be. And I think that's very important for a girl to hear that from her father. So I think that's why I have a high risk tolerance in business. And I'm constantly telling Scott, like he's got another business of his own that's a healthcare technology software company. And whatever he wants to spend on that business, I'm like, go for it. Like whatever you need, if it's a conference, if it's to, take this course or this class or, go to this networky thing or join this organization or whatever, I'm like, go do it. Whatever you think is going to help your business grow, I want you to be able to do it. And he's the same with me, like with Wendistry. He's like, and he's even looking out for me, like, here, this podcast course, this looks really interesting. I think you could get some stuff out of it here, so we support each other in that way. And he has high risk tolerance also. So I think that's something that as an entrepreneur, if you're going to be successful, yes, you should be smart. I'm not telling anybody to like quit their job tomorrow and go out and start your own thing. I'm not advising that. I'm just saying, know yourself and learn who you are and what you're capable of handling in your life. And then I also want to add, he and I don't have children. If we had children, and we don't have pets, so we have nothing to pay for except for some plants, and that's it. That makes a huge difference as well. We had to plan for college and braces and weddings and all of that stuff. That would make a huge difference on our risk tolerance and our abilities to invest into our businesses.
That brings up a great topic. I love how much you get to talk about Scott in this as well. But what's it like, working so closely with your husband? Because it sounds like y'all are kind of in lockstep with everything, which is great. But what's it like having that, not only owning companies together, but then having your own companies side by side?
Right. So we used to, when we were dating, our favorite thing to do was to take Tuesday afternoon at noon off. And he and I both had lived in separate apartments down in Uptown, Dallas. And we would walk into the Mi Casina in West Village. And we'd get there at noon and we'd have a Mambo taxi and a salad. And we would start with cocktail napkins. Like he and I would have ideas after idea. I wish I still had those napkins. Like literally by the time we wouldn't leave until like 7 p.m. We'd be very schmasty, fantastic afternoon, but we walked there for a reason so that we could stumble home. And we would just sit there and think of business ideas. We could do this, or we could do that, or what do you think about this? Or I read an article on that, and what do you think if we twisted it that way? And my husband owns more GoDaddy URLs than anyone on the planet. I'm willing to make that bet. Here's my favorite one that he owns. iflewintheLoo.com is going to be eventually a travel website about like traveling and experiences on planes.
Okay.
So I have no idea how that thing's going to make money, but it's going to be hilarious. I mean, he already has like a logo scratched up and everying. It's just adorable.
Is it on fire and rotating?
No,
okay.
Not, but it might need to be. We might need to do that. So that was our dating. Like our dating is always been, and even now it still is, a lot of business conversations. Like I'm thinking of last night. I spent all day yesterday in a video studio, literally from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. recording audio podcasts that were also on video in a professional studio. And so I got home at 5:30 and I am exhausted. I've had nothing but a tiny slice of turkey and 3 pieces of lettuce as a salad for lunch. And I crammed it in my mouth in like 95 seconds. And I'm like, I want silver fox. Dinner alcohol 3/4. I'm like, I want it. I need a glass of wine. I need a chicken fried filet mignon and baked potato and gravy. All of it. And we're going now. And we went. And then not only did we finish a bottle of wine at the Silver Fox, but we came home and finished off a bottle of port in our wine room. We have a wine room here in the house, which most people use as a study, like that office front room in most people's home. It's a wine room in our house.
Nice.
So we sit there in these 2 nice armchairs and we just continue a business conversation last night. So we still have those conversations, and eventually be looking for this one too, because he owns this URL called Sundays in the Sack. And Scott and I want to produce a video series on every Sunday. He and I in pajamas, tasteful. This is no crazy.
Okay.
In our bed, we're going to give husband and wife business advice to husband and wife entrepreneurs. And we were going to make it funny. Like, I really want like somebody, like a pajama company, to sponsor us, whatever, or Sheets or whatever. Like, eventually we will do this when we're like here money, not just here money. So we feel like we have some real stories to tell and lessons to share, but look for that in future years. Sundays in the Sack. I'm
feeling a phone call to Snuggies coming up. I don't know.
I know. So that's, he and I have always talked that way and been that way. I don't know of other husband-wife entrepreneur teams that get along the way we do. Like, I hear horror stories about, yes, I was in business with my husband and he ran this or he didn't do that or whatever. Like, it's bad for some people, but for us, I don't know. It's just always worked. So I don't know what advice to give around that, but for us, it's always worked.
One of the things that Sammy mentioned when he read your bio, and I'm going to look down and read it, is basically you help your clients learn to speak with significance.
Yes.
That really jumped out to me. And that was something that really piqued my curiosity. I would love for you just to expand a little bit about that. Maybe what are some of the things that you see in people that you're able to maybe quickly be able to identify and help coach them on? And maybe what are some things just, whether you're doing a podcast or you're communicating with your spouse or the people you work with or whoever it might be, speaking with significance is such a powerful tool, but it's not something that I see being reinforced or taught, consistently. So I'd love to hear your take on that.
Right. So you're referencing Wendistry.com, which is my new business. And what I am finding is that a lot of people who start podcasts just think that they just need the gear and then they're just going to sit down and start talking. Oh my goodness. Did I just lose everybody?
We can still hear you, but you're paused in a very cool, shadowy kind of pose right now. There you are.
Am I back? Okay, there I am. So sorry about that. Okay, anyway. So they get the gear and then they think they're just going to sit down in front of the mic and just start talking. And what it says on my site is pontificating is pointless. Say something significant. So I'm a big believer in, because I have a background in it. So a lot of my career was, as I said, digital strategy. And a lot of that is content strategy and content marketing and thinking about having the end in mind with what you're trying to do when you do sit down in front of the microphone. So when I take on a new client for Wendistry, we start with a half-day strategy session. And that means, are you really a subject matter expert, or are you just wanting to sit down and share your opinion? And if you're wanting to sit down and just share your opinion, that's fine, but we need to have planned out what is the comprehensive story? What is the point? What is the mission? What's the purpose? And then also, what's the action that you want your audience to take as they're listening every week? and then coming back. I mean, how are you going to encourage them to share the podcast? So good content will attract an audience. I mean, it eventually just does, because it's quality material that people start sharing through word of mouth and sharing it with their friends and their business associates and et cetera. But saying something significant, again, like your day, requires planning. It requires thinking it out. It requires, and then also, and this is why I think it needs somebody who is outside yourself, so i.e. hire me, is I'm looking at the forest and the trees, and you're stuck in the middle of it because you're the person who is the subject matter expert. Somebody like me who isn't the subject matter expert is going to be thinking like the audience and anticipating, as the subject matter expert is talking, what are the questions that the audience is really going to be thinking about and want to hear the answers to. So thinking about it that way is also another way that I make sure that my clients are saying something significant. It's not only addressing and being aware of what are the questions that the audience is going to have in advance, but it's making sure that you're saying those things specifically and not wandering around in a field of just yammer and pontificating.
Two of the things that I really appreciate you talking about is, one, the planning aspect of it.
Yeah.
Right.
And Sammy and I talk about this all the time. We've probably mentioned this thing on every single podcast we've done. Preparation equals separation.
Yep.
And I've gotten to the point to, for me, I think I learned this through how many meetings I have when I had my sales career and now as a fundraiser and chief development officer. Before every conversation, every meeting, I realized that I'm only going to be as strong as my preparation. And that's even crossed over to my personal life. So, we talk about scheduling time to visit with friends and family. I prepare some of the things that I want to talk to my friends about before I have those conversations, so that I've got things to be able to talk about and things that I'm interested in. And I just find that those conversations go so much better when I put just a little bit of preparation into them.
Yep.
And then the second thing you talked about is another item that Sammy and I are very passionate about. And we wrote a blog about this recently, but it's called your blind spots. And
Yes.
You really just nailed this about what you do in your service is oftentimes we're so focused on everything that we're doing, but we've got blind spots.
Yep.
And so if you can bring somebody you trust in to be able to look and say, hey, what are you seeing that I'm not seeing? That is a superpower, but it's also very difficult to do because it involves opening yourself up and being open to constructive criticism, or maybe just sometimes being able to just pivot to say, okay, well, that's not even something that I thought about, yet you're helping me realize that's what my audience or whoever it is that I'm speaking to, that's what they really want. So I need to be able to meet that. So I just love the encouragement on planning and really finding people to help you see what you're not seeing.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, one of my favorite aspects about that, and Greg mentioned that too, I don't know if I've ever told anyone the story, but about when I was younger and I had my own phone in my room, that was a big deal.
Yes.
Yeah, it was a big deal. They put it in the extra line and I had my own, so I could call anyone. That was like my freedom, right?
Yes.
I lived kind of in a small town, kind of out in the country. So like I couldn't really go anywhere. I mean, you can go play in the fields or whatever, but I'll never forget growing up, I used to get so nervous when I'm talking to girls or talking to friends or whatever, that I used to do the same thing. I used to actually write down at least 5 things that we would talk about, especially with girls. And so it's like, you would never have a dull moment. So yeah, that's funny. I hadn't thought about that in years. But I guess it goes way back when to.
Well, Sammy, I may get myself in trouble, but I still, before I talk to my girlfriend on the phone, I'll still write down 3 or 4 things. I'm like, these are some good things to bring up and like talk about, whatever. Like I got to write it down. I'm just a big dork when it comes that way.
That's good.
That's
good habit.
Yeah, it really is. Well, talk to us a little bit more about Wendistry. I know it, and the fact that you've made this transition from a kind of digital marketing company to consultant to working with like so many different organizations, and we'll touch on local communities here in a little bit, but why podcasting? Like what made you shift to this medium, and why do you think this is so important?
So I think it's important because it's super hot right now. I mean, I feel like everyone is starting one, but the key is people may be starting them, but they're not staying consistent with them. So that's another point that I'm going to talk about, or then that you guys are both very familiar with. So my ideal client is a woman with a book, a business, experience, a product, a something. Like I'm not helping, I'm very revenue oriented. And I think that if you're going to start podcasting as a hobby, that's great, but that's not where I'm coming from. If you're coming to me, I'm going to help you figure out how to monetize this situation. It's either going to help drive your book sales or your business service sales, or it's going to drive revenue to something. This isn't just a marketing exercise. So what I do is, like I said, I start first with the digital strategy, a comprehensive half-day session around who's your target audience, who's your persona. We go through the whole, here's the example of Lululemon exercise of, Ocean and their whole persona person. And we answer those questions around who's your target audience, but then also and I'm sure you guys are both familiar with Donald Miller's story brand, 7 Steps of Story. Are y'all familiar with his company, Story Brand?
I'm actually not.
Okay, so here's a shameless plug for Donald Miller and Story Brand. It is a fantastic way to organize your content on your website, and to where all that you're doing is driving people towards doing business with you. So the 7 Steps of Story talk about a hero character who is your ideal client, your ideal customer, has a problem, meets a guide. Your company, Wendistry, is the guide, and who gives them a plan of action. Oh God, it gives them a plan of action to help them avoid failure and end in success. And I'm missing one because there's 7 steps. And so if you read the copy on my website, on the homepage of wendistry.com, I literally am walking you through those 7 steps, to where at the bottom, it's like, enter your email here and let's set up a free consultation, like just an initial chat. So I'm driving people towards, if you recognize yourself with this challenge, I can help you overcome this. Here's the easy 3-step plan. I mean, you'll see it on my website. But Donald Miller's 7 Steps of Story. So for my clients, when I do a half-day strategy session with them, I'm walking their company through the 7 Steps of Story. The fact that they are the guide to their audience, and who is their audience, and what's their audience's problem that we're going to address, and what's the plan, and how are they going to avoid failure? What is failure for their client? And then what is success? And how are we going to position my client's company to be the provider of that success? So we walk through that. And then the final piece that I walk through on a strategy session is a business model canvas. Are y'all familiar with the business model canvas?
No, I'm not.
I'm getting quizzical looks. Okay. So it used to be, back in my day, if you were starting a business, you wrote a 30-page business plan. Like you just, you broke out the Word document and you dove in there and wrote something that was War and Peace almost. And then the minute you finished it, it was completely irrelevant, because the shifted or changed or something else happened and you decided to do something else. Okay. A business model canvas is a 1-pager that literally is your entire business on one sheet. And I'm wishing that I could pull this up at the same time that I'm talking to you, but it's a chart of core activities. So key activities, key values, unique value proposition of the company, what are revenue streams, what's the cost structure look like, who are your ideal target audience, target client industries, and and customer segments. Like it's all this one chart and it's got all these blocks on it, and you fill this in and you can constantly look at the state of your business on a one pager, and you can keep it refreshed and updated, and you've got a clear plan in front of you of here's my key activities, here are my target customers that I'm going after, these are my costs, these are my revenue sources, go. So I've done that for Wendistry, and it also helps drive the activities in the planner. So all of these things are kind of loosely, they feed on each other. So that's what I provide my clients with a half-day strategy session. And by the time we get through all of that, then they have a plan around, okay, now what's my podcast purpose? What am I going to talk about during the podcast that's going to help drive revenue based on the business model canvas? And then we can start talking about the tertiary things, which is where most people start, i.e., what's the name of my podcast? What are my brand and logo colors? And what does my cover art look like? And yada, yada, yada. Like that's where most people start. I want to start a podcast. Okay, let's make a really cute graphic and let's make the show called this. And that is way down the list after you've done all of these other high level things. Like figure out who you're freaking talking to. That's number one. So those are my services, so that, and then once the client has decided on the name of the podcast, the cover art, the blah, 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 whatever, then I sit down and I come back and I work with them on a content map and a strategy around, okay, we're going to launch this thing in December, which means we need to start thinking about what are the topics for the podcasts now. So I start a Google sheet and we just start free flowing on topics. Is there a specific order of things? I.e., if the client has written a book and the book has a chronological timeline to it, we want the podcast to follow that similar chronological timeline. But if you're just an entrepreneur who wants to share your story or your journey, that doesn't necessarily have to be a chronological timeline. It can be a, hey, here's a thought. Hey, there's a thought. And, so the order doesn't matter. But you have to think through that. Which way are you going to go? And then also, most people, if they don't have video or audio training, suck when they start talking because they get the mic in front of them and they're like, oh my God, what they thought they could talk about for half an hour, they talk about for 3 minutes and then they're done and they don't know what to do with the rest of it. So having somebody like me who can be a co-host, and again, I want to stress that this is how my business is different from everyone else that I know of so far. I'm helping the client launch their podcast. They are the star. It's their show. I'm sitting down and helping pull out those questions that are going to make them look good, that are going to make the podcast worth listening to. So that's how I'm different. Right now, I've got 6 women clients, all at different stages of, development of their podcast. Like I said yesterday, I spent a full day with my first client. This is the first time she's done a video with the audio, but we've already recorded 12 other episodes, just audio only. So her podcast will launch the week, 2 days after Labor Day. And we've been recording since April. So she's going to come out of the gate and be able to push out and push live a weekly podcast because we're going to have 16 episodes ready to go. Like we're already through December. And I'm super excited about that because she's going to be able to take a holiday. I'm going to be able to take a holiday. We're not going to be frantically trying to figure out, oh my God, we have to record next week. And that's the other thing about having the editorial calendar and content map is that you're being able to plan prior to needing something to go out tomorrow.
When you talked about that business canvas, Sammy and I, we used to be in a Vistage coaching group for many years together, and we did a workshop one day, and we called it an organization at a glance.
Yes.
And at Vogel Alcove, where I work now, we do that, but it's a little bit different. It's more of kind of like a highlight of the organization and our facts, those type of things. But the overview that you gave, I thought was so beneficial that I'm going to go back to that. And Sammy, I think you and I have a real opportunity. We have done this to an extent with the pursuit of growth, but we have not done it in the concise fashion that you described in literally about 35 seconds. That was very impressive. So I just want to thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
My question to you is, based on so many people that I know that have started podcasts, and just podcasts that I've found online that I've found interested and started following, I see a similar pattern that you touched on when we first started talking: inconsistency.
Yeah.
And then it falls apart. Yep. So what do you think? What are some of the things that you do to help your clients be able to get that consistency? I think one probably is like you've done. You build a lot of podcasts up front so that then you've got that runway. But what are some other tips and tactics that you use to help people realize they've got to have the discipline to make this a priority?
So I hold their feet to the fire. Honestly, they have to sign a minimum 6-month commitment with me. If I'm going to help them launch their podcast, they are committed to 6 months of production with me. I'm not going to have my personal reputation attached to a podcast that just goes out there for 3 weeks and then flops and fails. I don't want to be able, and I don't want to spend all of my time, because I'm investing. I mean, they're paying for it, obviously, but I'm investing a lot of my creative energy in this half-day strategy session, in the content mapping meeting, in the editorial calendar building. Like, you've got to be committed to this thing. And especially when I'm showing you how you can build revenue against this, it's not just a cost center. I think that's a big reason why I'm driven to build a business model that way, because if it's a hobby or a thing that I just poke at and do every once in a while, I'm not going to give it the time or the commitment. And yes, it will flop after 3, 5, 6 weeks, but I force my clients to put some monetary skin in the game, and we start booking episodes on calendars. Like, I start setting up, okay, we're recording here, here, and here, and we're recording here, here, and here the next month, and here, here, and here the following month. So that's the way I do it. I take over their schedule, really.
What are a handful of your favorite podcasts?
Oh my, I knew you were going to ask that. Okay. I have my girl crush. I have 2 girl crushes, Megyn Kelly and Grace Kelly. Those are my 2 idols. Grace Kelly was, I think, an amazing woman for her time. And she was so just drop dead gorgeous, and was, by all accounts, just a model of grace and feminine strength and beauty. And then Megyn Kelly, because frankly, she's a badass. She's got her, she's had her story and her experiences, and she's a lawyer, and she's smart. And I love that. I love smart women. And I also love the fact that the studio that I video produced in yesterday is a studio in Addison, and they actually produce the Megyn Kelly podcast. So it is, she records in New York, and her guest is wherever he or she is, and they actually do the production at a studio in Addison. She has her own room. So I've gone in there and like taken my picture in front of her. I'm like, please get her to move to Dallas, please. So anyway, those are so the Megyn Kelly show is one. I'm gonna look at my phone here at who else is on that I listen to all the time. I love Gary Vee. I love Gary Vaynerchuk. He cracks me up. I love his straightforwardness. I love straightforward people. I also love the Unemployable Initiative. If you've ever heard of Brian Clark. So a little bit of backstory. Brian Clark is the reason why Lifestyle Frisco existed and started. Scott went to, Brian Clark is the founder of Copy Blogger. If y'all are familiar with that site, he
Yep.
used to live here in Dallas and was an attorney, and then started Copy Blogger, which has gone to spin off several businesses, and he's amazing, and he lives in Boulder. So anyway, Scott went to a course in Boulder on how to start a hyper-local media site. And here's a fun factoid, of the 50 people who attended that event, 1 year later, they all went off and started their own local media websites, 50 sites. 1 year later, 3 were left. 2 years later, we were left. We are still the only ones left from all of that. So Scott and I are very close to Brian, Scott more than I am, but love Brian Clark and his Unemployable Initiative, which is a whole nother business that he's doing. And then I'm going to say my third favorite one is, or fourth favorite one, whatever number I'm on, is one called This Is Today. And I love it because it is literally a 10-minute, 15 minutes is long for them, but it's a 10-minute snack on what happened today in history. And it can go all the way, and like he'll pick factoids about this happened in the 1897 or this happened in 1972. Like he's not, he'll give 2 or 3 factoids about what happened today in history and give some commentary on it. And it's just super interesting and fun. So I love that one too.
I think I'm going to add all of those to my phone, at least look into them too, because I have a real problem. I'm a collector of digital media things. So like, I love podcasts. I love YouTube shows. I'm embarrassed to say, like, let me see what it is right now. Like, I have 1,001 alerts on my YouTube app right now because of so many content channels that I follow. And it's hard to keep up with because there's so many good things coming up, and so many good things coming out. But yeah, I definitely want to look into that. And I love like snackable content like that too. Like,
yes, I'm becoming a fan of that. So I have a client right now. She just finalized her show art today. I don't want to reveal her name yet and all of that, but she is a major entrepreneur here in Dallas, has had a successful exit in the hundreds of millions of dollars range. And she's wanting to start a podcast. She's violating my principle about it has to make money because she has so much money, it doesn't matter. So I'm fine with that. She's really just wanting to serve women entrepreneurs. So her podcast is going to be a 10 to 15 minute daily lesson on think about this. Here's a lesson I learned on that, and she gets a lot of feedback and commentary on a Facebook group that she's a member of, and a lot of women are engaging with her. So she's getting a lot of questions that are automatically going to become like, she's already started her own editorial calendar of, I want to talk about this, then I want to talk about this, I want to talk about this. And she's working on that right now on her own. So I'm not having to hold her hand on that. We're still deciding whether or not she wants me to co-host with her, or if literally she's going to sit down and just do a monologue. She probably will end up doing that, but she'll be great at it. And she's got an enormous network of people and women and a global network who her podcast is going to be a fantastic success. So I'm excited about that.
We're definitely going to be checking out your site to follow up on who that is. Are you going to be hosting like the people, like the podcast that you produce and help produce on that site?
Yes. So I have a page on my site, title or section on the site called Podcast Portfolio, and I'm about to update that with a couple of other people that I'm adding as clients. Now that they're getting their show art together, I'll be adding that on there, and a link to where you can subscribe on, iTunes or whatever. So yeah. But I mean, I want to mention one other thing real quick as far as my clients, so people can get kind of a broader picture. I did help. I spent January to June of this year as the treasurer for a local city council campaign. So a woman ran for Frisco City Council by the name of Angelia Pelham. And when she asked me to be her treasurer, I said yes. And you have to start a podcast. Like literally that was my answer. It was yes, and you have to start a podcast. So I started a podcast with her, doing exactly what I do, asking the questions. She's the star of the show. It's called the Pelham Podcast for those who want to look that up. Pelham. We're probably going to rename that now that, yes, she won. We got elected. Yay. It was a fantastic ending. But having her launch that podcast was an enormously successful piece of content where voters could listen to her say with her own mouth her viewpoints, her positions, her platforms. She could refute negative, lies that happened during the campaign. Like, other things people would say, oh, she believes in this, and oh, she believes in that. And I'm like, nope, we're calling all of that out on this podcast. If somebody said it on Facebook and put their name to it, they're getting called out on the podcast. So-and-so said that you believe this. Is that true? And Angelia would answer it and say no, and here's why, and whatever. So it became a resource for voters to hear from her. And I hope that it had an influence on her being elected. There were a lot of things that had influence on her being elected, but I'm super proud of that campaign. And that's something else that I would love to do. I volunteered. Angelia did not pay me for any of that. I volunteered my time and did all of it pro bono work for her. And I would be honored to do that for another female candidate that I believe in. But I have to believe in them. I have to believe in their position. I have to believe in their character. So that's just my personal opinion on that.
Wendi, I'm interested in what you mentioned there about utilizing a podcast to be able to really highlight a politician's stances and views. And in fact, I guess it was during the presidential campaign, and without going into details of who I was following, I'll just say that a candidate that I did not support was on a podcast that I listened to. And he had a platform to be able to talk in depth about his ideas, what it really meant. He was able to address, well, my opponent is saying this about me. He's taking this about what my stance is and saying this and this and that. And while I still disagreed with him, I was blown away, and I actually understood where he was coming from. And it gave me such a broader understanding of, okay, this isn't just a guy that's just out here to, get power and then just torture the world. It was just a guy that just had a different way of governing that personally, I think there's a better way. But it was so beneficial to have him have a platform. And I would love for our politics, and I guess it goes down to, do people have the attention spans? And it's going to come down to the people that are engaged and actually are passionate about, governing, whether it's our local government, our state, or our federal, getting involved in this. But just the podcast platform was such a better way of going about it than debates, commercials, or just spots on the radio.
Yes, absolutely. Because, especially for a local election, outside of, I think, chambers of commerce might still host, candidate forums. But even then, it's just like the presidential election. It's candidate A, you have 90 seconds to say something. Then candidate B has 30 seconds to rebut. And then it goes back to, like, who can get across their point in 90
Wendi,
seconds?
I can't decide what I want for dinner in 90 seconds. Much less like solve the problems of our country.
Unless it's tacos.
Of course, tacos and margaritas. Yeah, voting for that every time. But yeah, you're so right, Greg. And plus, it lets you see the candidate on their feet also, if you will. Yes, it's a podcast, so there may be some editing going on, but there's not a lot of editing going on. It's like this, like what we're doing right now. You're getting the real me, and y'all aren't going to be able to edit that out. And it was the same way for Angelia. And it also became an enormous resource for when our social media manager would catch comments on Facebook. She would say, oh, no, here's episode 4 of the podcast where Angelia talks about what she really believes on that. Like, you shut the whole conversation down right there. Like, no, you look like a moron when you come back and say, no, she doesn't really believe that. Yeah, she just said it, and it's on video and audio right here. Here you go.
Yeah.
So, so it's, I hope that more politicians will get into it. Unfortunately, I don't believe that they will. I don't believe that most of them will, because there's nowhere to hide.
Right.
So the true candidates who really are quality candidates will do it because they believe in what they're saying and they can back it up. Because there's nowhere to hide on something like this, on this medium.
It's a perfect segue to a group of questions that we had discussed previously when we were thinking about the show, and you touched on that hyper local content, right? How you know Scott went to the conference or the workshop. Why is that so important? You talk about your work with the hyper local content as well here with like the local community and with the local politicians. But talk about that. A lot of your focus has been in those hyperlocal markets. Can you explain that a little bit more?
So honestly, Scott and I met, or when we met, I was working on a magazine, a startup magazine down in Uptown Dallas. And I was 33, 34 years old, and Scott was 30 years old. And this entire team there were 20 of us working on this magazine, all after work, all part-time. Nobody's getting paid anything. This was a gigantic, like, clubhouse, literally, of 30-year-olds who were single. And so, of course, we got together and made a magazine about ourselves, which is exactly what you do. So we printed this magazine for a year, and I was head of marketing and worked with the salesperson to create, the media kit and try to get advertisers and all that kind of thing. But Scott took most of the photographs for the magazine. So that's how he and I met. Like, our entire relationship has been around local media, which is weird because he has a degree in psychology and I have a degree in economics. I mean, you talk about two things that just have nothing to do with, neither of us are journalists, English majors, writers by training, nothing. But the reason why I'm so passionate about local and Scott is so passionate about local is because small businesses are the backbone of this country. I mean, and America, we are founded on the freedom of, if you don't like the way a product works or you don't like the way something is, you start something new. You do it yourself. You bake a better brownie or cupcake or whatever. You build a better yoga pant, Lululemon. I mean, all of these things, or Sarah Blakely, Spanx. You stop cutting off your pantyhose legs and you go out and you find a material that is better and you make the thing. So, but coming back to local, most small businesses are local. I mean, they're servicing a local constituency, a local audience, and to support your local community and your local small business is just a huge passion for Scott and me. And typically they're strapped. They are somebody who is not only making the muffins, but also, marketing the muffins and having to package the muffins and also do an Instagram shot of the muffin and like all the things, and clean up the kitchen after the muffins are made, and then do payroll to pay people for serving out the muffins. Like, it's a lot. And so creating a local media site that had enough audience to where the local business could pay a nominal rate and fee versus print advertising. So here was our market differentiator, was the fact that we were able to charge way less for advertising on Lifestyle Frisco, which was native content marketing, like written articles, podcast interviews on these people, and videos on these people, not an ad in a thing, in a magazine that Okay, only if Joe stopped on page 37 in the bottom left-hand corner were they going to see the coupon for the dry cleaners. Well, we're not interested in Lifestyle Frisco wasn't interested in the coupon from the dry cleaner. I want to know about Sam, who started the dry cleaner. And why should everybody in Frisco care about this dry cleaner and Sam and his immigrant story and the fact that he's, supporting 3 families and sending money back home to India or whatever his story is? Like, let's get people emotionally connected to their local community through these business owners. That was the impetus for all of it at Lifestyle Frisco. And it still is. I mean, you can tell I get riled up. It's still enormously important to me. And then to do on the flip side of that, Greg, you with Vogel Alcove are aware of our entire corporate social responsibility piece of Lifestyle Frisco, which is giveforfrisco.com. So the way that came about was Mayor Cheney, again, when he was elected, during the first few months, his chief of staff had him going all around town, speaking to every organization, every, community group or HOA, neighborhood or whatever, and just to get to know people in the community. And what she discovered was at most of these events, people would come up to him afterwards and say, I love my town. I want to give back. Who can I give back to? Either I want to give my time, I want to write a check, I want to be a volunteer, I want to serve on a board, whatever. And so poor Mayor Jeff would be standing there, deer in the headlights, trying to think up a nonprofit in Frisco that was of service. And he ended up saying the same 2 or 3 over and over and over again. Well, if he kept saying Frisco Family Services, which is one that addresses families in need and housing and clothing and shelter and all those kinds of things, he ended up saying that all the time. What if this person standing in front of him was really interested in animals and, dogs, like dogs was their passion, or veterans or whatever, then that isn't connecting for that person. And they're going to go away and just go, oh, well, okay. So we came to the rescue for him and said, that's going to be, and because Scott and I had been thinking about for years, how can we do something through the company to give back? What is something unique that we can do to give back? And we never landed on anything. Like everything just felt like it was just not unique enough. It wasn't worth it either for us or for the nonprofits, etc. So this came together in a perfect storm of, we've got it. We're going to make a site, a section on Lifestyle Frisco called Give for Frisco, and giveforfrisco.com redirects into that section on our site. And what we do is we give the basic business services to every nonprofit that we know of that either is based in Frisco or serves the Frisco community for free. So we now have 100 nonprofits that are on giveforfrisco.com, and they're broken out into 6 issue areas: arts and culture, animals, social services, veterans, and I'm gonna miss the last 2. I want to say one is kids, maybe youth is one, and then I can't remember the 6th one. But if you go to giveforfrisco.com, what you can do is, if your passion is for veterans and volunteering or giving to a veterans organization, you just click the drop down and hit veterans, and it filters out. So now all you're going to see are the veterans organizations. And so what we do for these nonprofits is they have their own each of them have their own standalone page, where at the top right is the donate button, which if you want to donate, that donate button goes directly to their bank account, their kitty. We are taking nothing from this. The second button is volunteer. So if you've got a high school senior who needs volunteer hours, or you want to volunteer at this nonprofit, you can hit the volunteer button and get connected with how to volunteer at that organization. And then if each of these organizations is having a golf scramble or a black tie gala auction or whatever their event thing is, we've got that as the third button to help promote. Or if there's something like a Frisco Family Services, where if I set out a donation bag, you can schedule a pickup Like we have that link on there too, if the organization has that. So we're giving all of that away for free to these nonprofits. And every year on February 14th, it's been declared, we have a mayoral proclamation. February 14th is Give for Frisco Day. And on Give for Frisco Day, we promote it to our entire audience to give $14, $140, or $1,400 to your favorite local nonprofit, or give to several. And we chose 14 for love, February 14th for a love reason. But we also wanted that 14 number to be a strange number so that the nonprofits could see and be able to tally and report. And we would be able to see how much money we're actually driving to these people. And so we're very proud of that day. I mean, we're not North Texas Giving Foundation. We are not raising millions and millions of dollars for these nonprofits, but we are raising a solid 5 figures for all of them every year, spread out across them. And so, yeah, that's why we believe in local. We believe in local, serving the community and supporting the local businesses and supporting the local nonprofits that are supporting the community. It's a circle.
Well, kudos to you, Wendi. And speaking on someone that works for a charity, I can tell you that unless you're a national or a huge charity that just has tons of national exposure, most charities and communities people aren't aware of.
Right.
And so there's a big disconnect. I can't tell you how often I get approached by people that learn about my organization, Vogel Alcove, which has been around for 35 years. And they say, I've never heard of you before. And, Sammy can attest to this. We do everything that we can to be able to raise our profile and to really, grow the organization, which we've done. But we have flourished because of organizations like you. Yeah. We have flourished because of the local, the grassroots, the connecting of word of mouth, you name it. And so it just takes everyone just doing a little bit. And so what you guys are doing there, I guarantee you, is making a tremendous impact. So kudos to you. Thank you. It's really, really inspiring to hear that.
Thanks. Well, that makes it all worth it. I mean, that's why we did it. So.
Well, and I love the fact that I just actually went to the website too right now because I wanted to see what this were.
So it looks like I'm freezing up a little bit now.
We got animals.
All right. Are we all back? I was freezing up a little bit.
Nope, you're good.
You're good. Okay. Yeah, I just want to run down those categories. So animals, arts and culture, education, health, social services, veterans, and youth.
Yep.
So yeah, please check out that link, and we can link that in the show notes as well.
Thank you.
Just in case.
Yeah, especially during COVID, these organizations are just hit hard. And the ones like yours, Sammy, who are, meeting families, like families who are challenged during these times, and people being laid off and, if there's abuse going on in the house, like these organizations desperately need funds.
Absolutely. Well, Wendi, to switch into a little bit of different style of questions, Sammy and I, having known you for, I guess Sammy's known you longer than I have, but as I've gotten to know you and I've done some research on you, there's some things that we thought were interesting we wanted to ask you about.
Okay.
So I know you like to travel.
Yes.
So, yes. Question for you, Wendi. If we were able to give you, which we're not, but if we were able to give you an all expenses paid trip to anywhere in the world, tell us, where would Wendi go?
Wendi would go with Scott to Venice, Italy, and she would spend a year in the Hotel Daniele.
Ooh, sounds like someone had that answer ready to go.
Oh, yeah.
Now, does Scott know this?
Yes, he knows that I would spend a year in the Hotel Daniele.
Now, what is it about Venice and that hotel that gets you so excited?
So Scott and I got married on November 1st of 2012, and that was a Thursday. And we got married at a resort that we went to a couple of weeks ago, again, for my birthday. It's an Iberostar called an Iberostar Grand Paraiso down in Playa del Carmen. And when we went last week, it was our 6th trip. Our wedding was our 3rd trip there. So this is a place that we go and we go and we go because it's phenomenal. It's adults only. It's 5-star. Everything is amazing. But when we got married, we took around 35 people, family, close friends, but they all went with us and spent the whole week. So because we got married there and we were there a whole week, I have always wanted to go to Italy. I had never been, and we wanted to do it right. And we finally took our honeymoon literally 3.5 years later. We went in the spring of 2016 and spent 3 weeks in Italy. And so we flew from here to Heathrow and then Heathrow to Venice, and getting off of the train, and that train station opens out onto the water and you see the buildings. I thought I was in Disney World. Like, I thought this cannot be real. Like, it doesn't even look real. It's so, Venice is so in Italy, all of it is so unlike the United States. The first thing that really, and I didn't realize it for a few days, what it was that was so different about it. There's no signage, no advertising, there's no billboards, there's no neon at the tops of shops. There's no, every little sign on a like a market or even a boutique, like even the Gucci store, the sign is like this, it's Gucci. And it's very blended into the architect. Like, they aren't wanting to take away from the architecture and their history. And when Scott and I came home after 3 weeks of being there, just walking into the airport and the Starbucks and the McDonald's and the it's like, oh my God, I need a padded room. I'm trying. It's just like, it was so jarring. But because of that, it's just magical. All of Europe is magical, but that was the first place. I'd never been anywhere in Europe before. That was the first place I wanted to go. And Venice was absolutely amazing. I mean, there's nothing like a city on the water. I mean, we don't have anything like that here. So that's my spot. And the Hotel Daniele is if not it's one of the top 3 hotels in Venice.
Okay.
So yes.
So one of the other questions we had for you, which is a fun one, is, have you ever been starstruck? And if so, by who and where were you?
No, I'm not that person. I don't like, I've walked past people in airports and things before, and then, you're 5 minutes later and the person you're with goes, oh my God, that's, whoever. I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. That's not me. And even if I saw Megyn Kelly or Daniel Craig or George Clooney or something like that, I would not approach. I am not that person. I would probably go, oh, that's what they look like in real life. And look at them for a minute and then go, okay, well, I'm ready to, go on and do my thing. That's just not me.
I flew into LAX one time, only once. And I was waiting on a bus to take me to a rental car company. And there was this lady that walked out, and she had a mob of cameras around her, and everyone was taking pictures. Everyone was running over to her and taking pictures. And I'm just looking over with my bag, and someone goes, do you know who that is? I go, no, I have no idea who that is. They're like, me either. And we just kind of walked away.
Yeah. And I mean, my thought process on that is, what am I going to say to this person that they haven't already heard 1,000 times? Oh, your movie, this was so amazing. I'm your biggest fan. Like, what is there's nothing original that I could say to this person that they would give 2 hoots about. So why bother them? Why bother them? Like, I feel sorry for that woman who goes through life surrounded by cameras. Like, I love that I can go to the grocery store with no makeup on. I mean, I don't ever want to be. So if one of your next questions is, which would you rather be rich or famous? Rich. I don't want anybody knowing me. I want to be rich and that's it. So I'll answer.
So, because of the work that I'm in, and Sammy is right there with me, we've met a lot of quote unquote celebrities or people that draw public attention. And what's interesting, when you get to know them on a personal level, you realize they're just like anybody else.
Exactly.
The things they want to talk about are things they're interested in. And it's not all the things that they've done, their movies, their sports, or whatever. It's just real life stuff. I will say, of all the people that I've ever met, there was one that I was slightly starstruck by.
Okay.
And this is going back about 10 years ago. I worked for a company that hosted a Super Bowl party for Snoop Dogg, P. Diddy, and Deion Sanders. And Deion Sanders and P. Diddy, just like you, I was like, okay, that's cool. Like, they're here, they're doing their thing, whatnot. But when I met Snoop Dogg, I was like, okay, I got to go talk to Snoop Dogg, right? And so our director of marketing introduced me, and he was so cool and so personable. And literally, we talked about pizza. We talked about he needs to go float the Guadalupe River down in New Braunfels. And we talked about who was going to win the Super Bowl. And he was a huge Steelers fan. And so, of course, that's when they were playing the Green Bay Packers here in Dallas for that Super Bowl. I had to play devil's advocate and be like, there's no way Green Bay is going to destroy you guys. And I think he appreciated that we talked about stuff that he wasn't going to talk about with anybody else that was at that event.
Yeah.
And so it was a 10-minute conversation. We gave each other kind of like knuckles and gave like the hug and walked off. And I was like, okay, I had to go and chat with Snoop Dogg. That was pretty cool. But outside of that, there's been nobody else that I've really been like, I've got to go talk to them.
I would talk to Snoop Dogg to simply ask him one question. What is the attraction to Martha Stewart? Like, how are they friends? That is so crazy to me, and I love it. I love it on every single level, but I really want to hear the story of how they met and built that friendship.
Well, Wendy, I'll give him a call, and then I'll get that answer. I'll get back to you.
I love it. Okay.
Oh, that's great. All right. Well, this is the part of the show where we want to do. We're going to ask you 2 questions, and we ask each one of our guests these 2 questions. So, Greg, I will take the first one. So, what first enters your mind when we ask you this following question? Wow. What is a favorite actionable tip, method, or routine or lesson learned in terms of self-development and growth that you can share with us to help your audience?
Oh, self-development and growth. Well, I've already hit the reading thing 5 different ways from Sunday. I'm gonna share a practical tip. I do this first thing in the morning. Every morning, I have like a green probiotic mix. First thing everybody should do before they reach for their coffee is drink 16 ounces of water with some kind of something, like a probiotic, a health booster, an immunizer. And I'm not going to promote any certain brand or whatever, but I have a green powder that's got like mushrooms and tons of vitamin B12 and all kinds of things. Like, before you reach for your coffee, hydrate yourself. You've just spent, 6 to 9 hours with no water and your brain is mostly water. So there's how I'm going to tie it to self-development. Your brain is mostly water. So drink water when you get up in the morning. But I can't drink just water. Some people get up and drink hot water with lemon, which is fine, great. But I really want to get 16 ounces in. So I have a green probiotics thing. So that's my tip on that.
I love that. And I love that it's actionable right there too, because that's actually one of the things that Dan talks about too, from a health and wellness perspective, and something that I do every day too. Yep. First things first, I will literally just take a glass of water and just chug the whole thing just to get it down as fast as I can, because I want to start with water. So I'm glad that you added that in.
I think all the research shows that that's a better way to wake up than caffeine and coffee. 100%.
Oh yeah, water. Definitely. And I'm such a fanatic about water. I actually have an app on my phone where I track how many 8-ounce glasses I drink every day. And my goal is at least 10.
Wow. That's awesome. That's a great habit.
Wendy, you've probably heard the question a million times. If you could go back and talk to yourself 10 years ago, what advice would you give yourself? That is not our question.
Okay.
Our question is looking the other way. So let's just pretend that the three of us are going to have a Pursuit of Growth time capsule that we're going to bury in the ground. And 10 years from now, we're going to dig it up and open it up. And we want you to write a piece of advice to yourself 10 years from now.
Okay.
What would you tell yourself?
My piece of paper would say, see, ... I told you it wouldn't happen.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
For all the things that I worry about and freak out about and get all wound up about, I mean, really, they never happen. So that would be my forward advice. See, ... I told you it wouldn't happen. You wasted energy, time, effort, whatever. It didn't happen.
I love that.
Well, this is now, Sammy, this is my favorite part of the show and the most difficult part of the show.
Okay.
So this is the part where Sammy and I try, the keyword is try, to narrow down all the amazing things that you've just shared with us.
Oh, wow.
Into our top 3 takeaways.
Okay.
So
Sammy, do you want to lead off and do you want to ping pong back and forth?
Yeah, that'll be good. I'm looking at my notes right now. So the first one, I think that really stuck out to me is it's a comment that you talked about that you and Scott do, that you would take time to create and think and dream about business and strategy. The fact that you scheduled that in to a daily or to a weekly routine or to a routine to get out of the day-to-day mess, right? Get out of the plans, get out of everything and just start dreaming and writing on those napkins. I love that. I think that's something that I'm going to implement into my life more than what I already do, because I think about stuff all the time, but just sit down, just have a creative session with myself. So I love that.
Yeah. Well, if I can add on to that real quick before you bounce, Greg, something else that Scott and I do, and y'all think we are super hokey, and this is very junior high, but I'm going to share it because I think it's important. Scott and I had our first date on November 1st of 2007. And our first date was at the Meyerson Symphony Hall, and we listened to Beethoven's Fifth. They did their Beethoven's Fifth thing. That was our first date. We got married on November 1st, 2012. And it's very ironic that even though we were in Mexico, the Meyerson, again, the DSO, Dallas Symphony Orchestra, played Beethoven's Fifth. It was crazy that they did the same concert at the night that we got married. We didn't see it. We were in Mexico. But here's the thing that he and I are adamant about. The first of every month is date night. It is our celebration, and we celebrate every month that we are together. It is very junior high. So on August 1st, 3 days ago, we celebrated our 165th month anniversary together.
Wow.
That is awesome.
That's amazing.
It's very junior high, but I love it. And it's great. I mean, it's our night. So I'm suggesting kindly putting it out for everyone in the audience to date your spouse. And here's an easy way to do it. Take your anniversary date, and every month go out, do something, extract yourself. And what made me think of it, Sammy, is you said extract yourself from the normal and focus. And so we do that. That's what we do.
Another great tip.
You're giving me ideas.
Yeah.
Okay.
The first takeaway that I want to share goes back to the comment about readers or leaders.
Yes.
And you mentioned that in the mornings you tend to like to read business books. Yes. In the evening you read fiction. Now, my takeaway also comes with a question. Okay. Do you read fiction at night? Because that allows your brain to kind of go from, when you're reading business books, it's more you're learning, you're really working your mind. When you get into fiction, you can relax and you can kind of let your mind and your creative space go. Does that help you to wind down and fall asleep at night?
Yes, that's exactly it.
That's the takeaway that I took.
Yeah, if I was reading High Performance Habits or How to
Simon Sinek.
Yeah, so, or something. If I was reading something business or development, then my brain's going to start going. I'm going to start thinking about all the things that I need to do, that I want to do, whatever. Like I'm going to get ramped up. So that's why I do it in the morning. It gets me motivated, and then in the evening, yes, I want to wind down. So reading about Hercule Poirot or Miss Marple and somebody getting stabbed in the library, a great way to wind down.
Well, my first takeaway is read fiction before you go to bed at night.
Yeah.
I love that. I think a good piece of advice. My dad's had 2 young daughters, and so anytime someone mentions anything about strong women, it's something that perks my ears up too, because I'm learning how to be the best girl dad that any dad can be.
Yeah.
But the advice that your dad gave you, that I think is advice that all dads should share with their daughters, is that you can do and be anything you want to be.
Yes.
I mean, I love that, and it's something that I have to constantly remind myself to remind them about as well. I mean, we're watching the Olympics together and watching them watch, like, female athletes run, throw the shot put, the female wrestler from the USA that won gold. I mean, it's spoiler alert, but it was amazing to see that, and they were just like, wow, like they were so impressed. But I think that's a good piece of advice that I'm going to continue to share with my daughters, that you can do and be anything you want to be.
Yeah, it's vital for I mean, because you're the first man in their lives, and your belief in them helps them when, as they get older, society, the media, their boyfriend, the boys at school, the man who's their first boss at their first job at the donut shop, or wherever they get their first job, sends different messages. And so if they've got a strong foundation of your messages, then they can get through that. They can get through, and it may not all be negative. I'm not saying that every man outside of your house is bad. It's just that they may not be as careful. They're not going to be as careful with the words that they say to your daughters. And so if you've built a fortress, a word fortress, and an action fortress of, you are worthy, you are powerful, you are capable. Those are powerful messages. And frankly, if you have daughters, you're fighting against Disney and all of this princess crap. And, a man is going to come and save me and take me away and all of that. Like, it's bad. It's bad teaching for women. They have to be taught, preferably by their father, that they have worth and that they need to participate in their own well-being in life.
I love that. So many good takeaways just right there. But the thing I just took down again, another one, was the word and action fortress. I just love that analogy there.
Well, speaking of relationships, that was the second takeaway that I took. And I love, Wendi, how you are so intentional. And you shared the story about how you are visiting with your parents weekly. You talk with your best friend on the phone daily. And then several times throughout this episode, you've given examples of how you still date your husband. And I love the story of the two of you finishing a bottle of wine at dinner and then coming back and sitting down and having another. Like, that gave me the biggest smile when you told that story. And so, but it just makes me think, and I hope the people listening, there are so many important people in our lives that all it takes is just a little bit of effort, and we're going to get so much back in return from that little investment. It's going to yield such a big turnout for us.
Yes. Yes.
And my last one is I'll have to choose. It's a tough decision here, but I'm going to go with one of the very first things that you said, was to keep your goals in front of you. And I think you do that by way of a planner, and there's many apps, and there's different, I'm totally digital kind of guy too, but I've even gone back to writing things down and then transferring them over into my digital planners as well. So I love that. I think that more people, as we move to more and more of this, I think that it's great to kind of find your rhythm and your resources about keeping those goals in front of you and being intentional with the planning.
Yep.
And then my third takeaway, it's going to be broad when I say this, but I can't narrow it down. It's just your passion towards one, everything you do, but more specifically, the conversation we had about your journey into being a business owner and entrepreneurship, and just in a relatively concise, short amount of time, you shared so many actionable tips and so many great best practices with such enthusiasm that once again, I'm going to be going back through this episode and like watching, pausing, taking notes, going back, taking more notes, because you really, really did, I think, not only just educate me, but people watching this on just a really good platform on the right way to approach the things that you want to do with your life. And all that to say that like your why is just coming through the screen of why you get up and do what you do. And I just really appreciate it. And I'll sum up everything that I'm going to say is, you talked about, best tips in terms of hosting a podcast. And Sammy and I, we still have a long way to go and a journey ahead of us of growing and learning. But I think one thing that we've gotten really good at is making sure that we bring on guests that are just freaking awesome. And you are freaking awesome. Thank you for just an amazing conversation. And I have thoroughly just enjoyed every single minute of this conversation.
Thank you. So have I. Thank you both very much. Appreciate it.
So with that, it is time for one of our other favorite segments, our shameless self-promotion and shameless plugs for all things that you do. So tell people how they can get a hold of you, and where and all that. Give your elevator pitch and all.
Yes. So everything is Wendistry, so it's my name, WENDISTRY.com. So Wendistry. And I am an executive producer and co-host for hire for women who are wanting to start their own podcast and getting significant things to say into the room. So that's me. I'm pretty much Wendistry everywhere: Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. All of that is Wendistry. But my primary platforms that I love to connect people with are LinkedIn and Twitter. Mainly LinkedIn though. And if you are a woman who's considering launching a podcast, I'd love to have a chat. If you're concerned about it, if you don't know where to start, then that's why I'm here. So
love it. Awesome. Well, you can learn more about the pursuit of growth and all things Sammy and Greg by visiting our website at www.livetpg.com. On our website, you can find links to all of our social channels. You can sign up for our weekly blog and, of course, the Pursuit of Growth show, where you'll have other episodes of amazing people like Wendy that we interview each and every week. And, of course, you can purchase our book, which is quite prominently displayed in the bottom right-hand corner of Sammy's picture, The Pursuit of Growth. Check out the book, give us your thoughts and feedback. But once again, Wendy, this was awesome. Thank you so much for coming on our show.
Thank you guys very much.
We've got to have you on. We've got to have you on again.
Well, whenever you wish. I appreciate it. All right.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.